I call up Holly Walker.
Yeah, well, there can be no doubt that we're experiencing a housing crisis in New Zealand at the moment. And in my contribution, I'd like to start with some statistics which illustrate the scale of this crisis, particularly in Auckland and Christchurch. In May, Mr Chair, the average house price in Auckland was $735,000. It now takes 70% of the average income to service the mortgage on a lower quartile priced house in Auckland. And that is in a context in which unaffordability is understood to be when you have to spend more than 30% of your income on housing. We know there is a major shortage of affordable housing in Auckland, with an estimated 13,000 new homes needed each year and only 3,000 to 4,000 being built, hardly any of which fall into the affordable category. In Christchurch, the situation is just as pronounced, although more concentrated in the private rental market. Trade Me statistics show average rent in Christchurch was up 26% in the May to June period compared to the same time last year, and demand for rental properties was up 47%. According to the Tenants Protection Association survey, 70% of respondents had had a rent increase post-earthquake, and 88% reported paying over more than 25% of their income on rent. And Christchurch homes, we know, are cold and mouldy, with 48% reporting mould in their homes. Now, nationwide, we know that 70% of the children who live in poverty in New Zealand are living in private rental homes, and very few of these are insulated. And while these problems are most pronounced in Auckland and Christchurch, housing affordability and quality are major challenges all over the country. So, what did the government propose to do about it in Budget 2013? Well, we got the Housing Accords and Special Housing Areas Bill reported back to the House today, and the Social Housing Reform Bill. The former is an unimaginative and ideological attempt to increase land supply and fast-track new housing developments by running roughshod over local democracy in the RMA. And the latter is the beginning of the dismantling of Housing New Zealand as a social agency. There is no guarantee under the Housing Accords and Special Housing Areas Bill that any new affordable houses will actually be built as a result, while under the Social Housing Reform Bill, the one positive element, the extension of the income-related rent subsidy to community housing providers, is undermined by the lack of adequate funding for the Social Housing Fund and the lack of government support for capacity building in that sector. Now, meanwhile, you'll hear the Minister crow about how Housing New Zealand is building more homes than ever, 2,000 new homes a year for the next 2 years, if we're to believe the Prime Minister. But what he won't tell you is that they're busy demolishing and selling houses as fast as they can build them. So those 2,000 new houses won't result in any net increase in their stock of affordable housing. And that's if they can even build them, because they only managed to build 154 houses in the last financial year. So we've got a long way to go, Mr Chair, before we start building 1,000 a year in the next 2 years. So, Mr Chair, I want to talk about what a smart green solution to this housing crisis would look like. And first of all, we would start by building affordable houses as a matter of urgent priority, both social and community houses and homes that are available for families to rent to buy as part of a progressive ownership proposal. Now, this would see the government building affordable homes for families with children to move into immediately, who could start paying a basic weekly rent to cover the cost of the investment, while anything in addition to that they paid would go towards purchasing equity in that home. It's a way to help families into home ownership without the need for a conventional bank mortgage or a deposit, and it directly addresses the lack of supply of affordable housing. Secondly, we would introduce a warrant of fitness for all rental properties, not just state houses, but for the private rental market, in which 70% of the children living in poverty are currently housed. And this would have to include minimum insulation standards as well as other standards of livability and weather tightness. But we would help landlords to meet these standards by extending the Warm Up New Zealand home insulation scheme and better targeting it towards landlords with low-income tenants. Thirdly, we'd amend the Residential Tenancies Act to ensure more secure rental tenure for tenants, to stop the social, economic and health damage that's done when frequent evictions require families to move sometimes dozens of times a year, and which soon will be no better in the state housing market thanks to renewable tenants.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Housing's definitely become a political headache for the